Good morning. It's 3 minutes after 10 and it could be pretty much any day since Boris Johnson became Mayor of London, at least as far as this programme is concerned. Because once again, and that was back in 2008, some of you weren't even born in 2000, including some of my colleagues. And how many times since then have we turned our attention to the question of either how does he keep getting away with it? 03456060973. Is this the end of the line for the most scandal-ridden politician in living memory? 03456060973. Why do people keep enabling him and facilitating him? Why do people like Dominic Raab keep debasing themselves on national television and radio in defence of somebody who is clearly and incontrovertibly indefensible? 03456060973. I could go on. In fact, I frequently do, and today I probably will. But the question remains the same. This is this is off the scale. I'm afraid, asking the question again. Don't hold me to this. You know what I'm like. I say something like this on a Tuesday, and by Friday I've forgotten. But I don't think I'm going to ask again. How can anybody still be supporting him? Because I know the answer to that question. If you're supporting him because you're in politics, you're in cabinet or in office, it's because you're fairly confident that you wouldn't be able to get a job shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic under any other Prime Minister. And if you're supporting him and you're not in Parliament or you're not in the Parliamentary Conservative Party, I'm afraid it's because you're a complete cult. There's no two ways about that anymore. You've fallen for some bizarre personality cult and you have debased yourself and denied reality and lied to yourself now, probably originally about the reality of Brexit. You certainly weren't lying to yourself or debasing yourself when you voted for it, but now that you can see exactly what it is that was in the box you bought, and it's a load of rancid old tat, you are desperately trying to convince yourself that you haven't bought a load of rancid old tat and that all those people you spent years being rude about were completely right all along. You have to keep supporting Boris Johnson because the alternative is to look that reflection in that mirror squarely in the face and acknowledge exactly what has been done to you. And that might sound a little unkind, but I do feel a modicum of sympathy for you still. But the question of how can you still be supporting this man, this serial philanderer, this blatant liar, this pathological deceiver, this despicable individual, how can you still be supporting him? That question isn't interesting anymore. Not to me, at least. It's not psychologically interesting. It's not politically interesting. I mean, you're pretty close to needing help, I would argue, if you still think that this is either normal or acceptable. You're also profoundly unpatriotic, whatever Liz Truss may try to tell you, because if you are still cheering or even sitting idly by while our country is turned into a clown car, while the skip fire rages ever more out of control, then you are complicit in that catastrophe. You are complicit in this chaos. You are part of it, and you are culpable. And yet you sit there claiming that the people who are desperate to see an end to this self-inflicted misery and these myriad catastrophes and these egregious scandals, somehow they're the ones that are not prioritising their country above personal advancement, personal interest or ambition, or of course just petty political point scoring. So make no mistake, and I completely sympathise with people who have lost the ability to know how big a deal this story is or how big a deal the current scandal may be, because, hold the front page, I fell into that category myself this morning. Do you know what happened this morning? I came to work, I started flicking through Twitter, and lots of people were making that rather good joke that pops up whenever there's a massive news day in the offing or on the horizon. I get quite a few messages saying things like, "Oh, I suppose it'll be parking tickets today, won't it, James?" Or, "Oh, what's it going to be, James? Is it going to be 3 hours of cycle lanes or something like that?" And I started getting a bit worried because I thought, what's happened? What's the big story? What's going on? I'm not actually that aware of anything enormous. I was vaguely aware that a former permanent undersecretary at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office had called out Boris Johnson. But I'm so used now to Boris Johnson being called out for having his pants on fire that I hadn't properly registered it. And then Rachel Venables walked past and she said, I suppose it's 3 hours of e-scooters today, is it, James? And I'm thinking, good God, even Rachel's at it now. There must be something enormous bubbling under the surface. And I mean, this is my job. I've completely missed it. And then Martin Stamford, my colleague over on LBC News, formerly, of course, of Sky News, says, "Oh, it's going to be one of those days, isn't it? And then I got a text message saying, I suppose you're going to be summoning the Usherwood a lot today, aren't you? He's going to be in and out of the studio like a fiddler's elbow." And I'm thinking, what is it? What's happened? What have I missed? What's going on? But it's important to remember that, I'm a listener too. just because I get to blather on for 3 hours every day. I'm a punter too. I'm a consumer of news. I'm not a player. I'm a spectator. And I just missed it. I'm afraid that I have, not for the first time, found myself so completely engulfed in scandal and reports of scandal, in lies, claims and counterclaims, that I hadn't properly registered what a big deal this one is, until everybody else started shouting, "This is huge." Former permanent undersecretaries don't do things like this. There is, if you like, a gentleman's agreement or a theory of good chaps in place. The most senior civil servant in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office until 2020 would never ordinarily to put pen to paper to describe Downing Street as lying. It's not the word he uses. He's a diplomat. So he simply talks about things that are not true. I'm going to read you the entire letter. And then I'm going to ask you one of the questions that I've been asking you since Boris Johnson became Mayor of London in 2009. Probably, do you think this is the one that's done for him? Or explain to somebody, I like this, and we haven't done it for a while, explain to somebody who has been asleep just for, should we say 6 years, been asleep since May 2016, just before the referendum vote. I think that might be a good point to spot. Explain to them how this Prime Minister is still in Downing Street. But anyway, here is the letter from Simon MacDonald, Lord MacDonald of Salford, Permanent Under-Secretary. I know the language is a bit arcane. The single most important civil servant in the Foreign Office, the man who effectively runs it, because Foreign Secretaries come and Foreign Secretaries go, but Permanent Under-Secretaries, well, they're not permanent exactly, but they are usually a lot less transient than their political masters and mistresses. 5 days after Mr. Pincher's resignation as Deputy Chief Whip, there remains significant confusion surrounding complaints about his behaviour prior to the drunkenness he admits at the Carlton Club on the 29th of June. Inaccurate claims by number 10 Downing Street continue to be repeated in the media. On the 3rd of July, the BBC website reported no official complaints against Pincher were ever made. Right, pause it. There, right there. What did I say to you halfway through last week? I said, the problem we've got now is Trumpian in both its scale and its importance. Why? Because if it comes out of Downing Street, you have to report it. I was unhappy with some Daily Telegraph journalists for repeating the ludicrous line that the Privileges Committee, looking into when Boris Johnson knowingly lied, or whether, I suppose, technically, Boris Johnson knowingly lied to the House of Commons, and a little bit of a spin from Downing Street, delivered spoon-fed to a couple of journalists at the Daily Telegraph, and the headline is Kangaroo Court. Johnson fears kangaroo court, or words to that effect. The words kangaroo court were on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. Why? Because if it comes out of Downing Street, you have to report it, even if you suspect it's not true or know it's not true. The story is what they have said. And as we saw with Donald Trump in America and Kellyanne Conway's Alternative Facts, the media doesn't know what to do with people that will look you in the eye and lie. They don't know how to deal with it. So even the BBC is reporting what has come out of Downing Street, and a former permanent undersecretary in the Foreign Office saying inaccurate claims by 10 Downing Street continue to be repeated in the media. He says inaccurate claims, I say blatant lies. And we're both right. This is not true. Just hold that thought for one moment. This is not true. Crossbench peer in the House of Lords, 5 years in a Conservative Foreign Office, absolutely no axe to grind except a very unfashionable belief in both the truth and the national interest. Watching as number 10 Downing Street injects blatant lies into the public discourse that are inevitably, although regrettably, picked up and amplified by not just, of course, on these occasions, the client media, the ludicrous forelock-tugging, cap-doffing journalists like Harry Cole at The Sun, who will report everything that Boris Johnson ever does in almost hagiographic terms, but proper impartial news sources like the BBC have no choice but to report what Downing Street is telling them, even when it is a lie. Or, to return to Simon MacDonald's own words, this is not true. In the summer of 2019, shortly after he was appointed Minister of State at the Foreign Office, a group of officials complained to me about Mr. Pincher's behaviour. I discussed the matter with the relevant official at the Cabinet Office. In substance, the allegations were similar to those made about his behaviour at the Carlton Club. An investigation upheld the complaint. Mr. Pincher apologised and promised not to repeat the inappropriate behaviour. There was no repetition at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office before he left 7 months later. The same BBC report continued. Downing Street has said Boris Johnson was not aware of any specific allegations when he appointed Mr. Pincher Deputy Chief Whip in February. By the 4th of July, the BBC website reflected a change in Number 10's line. The Prime Minister's official spokesman said Mr. Johnson knew of allegations that were either resolved or did not progress to a formal complaint, adding that it was deemed not appropriate to stop an appointment simply because of unsubstantiated allegations. The original Number 10 line is not true, and the modification is still not accurate. And here it is. Hold on to your hats. Here it is. This is how low we've come. This is where Boris Johnson has brought us all. Mr. Johnson was briefed in person about the initiation and outcome of the investigation. There was a formal complaint. Allegations were resolved only in the sense that the investigation was completed. Mr. Pincher was not exonerated. To characterise the allegations as unsubstantiated is therefore wrong. Why has he done this? I will let him tell you. I am aware, he writes, that it is unusual to write to you and simultaneously publicise the letter. I am conscious of the duty owed to the target of an investigation, but I act out of my duty towards the victims, Mr. Pincher, towards the victims. Mr. Pincher deceived me and others in 2019. He cannot be allowed to use the confidentiality of the process 3 years ago to pursue his predatory behaviour in other contexts. Boris Johnson and everybody who has defended him in the last week, up to and including the Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab, who soiled himself in spectacular fashion on at least 2 national television stations this morning, have been protecting a sexual predator despite knowing exactly what he was. Hey ho, good old Boris, he got all the big calls right. Something vaccines Ukraine. Come on. We've got to be better than this. We've got to be better than this. I don't care how tight that scarf is knotted around your neck and the little Boris Johnson flag is waving furiously in your front window. We have got to be better than this. So why aren't we? 0345 6060 973. I don't know what question to ask, specifically and precisely. I'm interested in why people like Dominic Raab debase themselves routinely and completely in front of the entire nation, almost every morning now. I'm interested in how these lies can be so blithely introduced into the public space, how the people who are sharing them are either doing so knowing that they sacrifice what's left of their own integrity upon the altar of Boris Johnson's overweening self-interest, or they are somehow too stupid to see what is plain to everybody else. But most of all, I care about my country and I care about its politics, and I still don't understand how this has happened. I understand the lies that were necessary to get Brexit over the line. I understand the lies that were necessary to get the withdrawal agreement signed, to get Boris Johnson into Downing Street. I understand the lies that are sometimes the currency of modern politics, the half-truths, the embellishments, the exaggerations and the evasions. I think of the possibly apocryphal tale of the cabinet minister 20 years ago in the back of a ministerial car on his way to a radio studio who asked an advisor to read him a report so that he could, with a straight face, say on the radio later whether he had read said report that actually he hadn't. Brackets, don't say it out loud, it was read to me instead. I understand the cut and thrust of politics. I do not understand how this country has been brought so low by this man. I do not understand it, and I have been chronicling it since 2008, when, like an idiot, I voted for him to become Mayor of London, and within moments I realised the epic error of my ways. And ever since then, I've been watching scandal after scandal, sexual, political, personal, professional, lie after lie after lie, culminating today in an unprecedented intervention from the most senior of civil servants, saying in terms that Boris Johnson and everybody who supports him are lying to you on a daily basis. And when one lie gets busted, out comes another lie. And when that lie gets busted, out comes another lie. And here's Dominic Raab to tell you the latest lie of all. 0345 6060 973. What the hell is happening? 21 minutes after 10. Go on, have a crack at this. Explain it. How can we have a Downing Street that is dedicated to inflating, disseminating, and then, of course, adapting and denying the lies of one man, in this case Boris Johnson? Do you know who else yesterday? And I don't know who briefed this. I think it was Beth Rigby at Sky News who got the story. Do you know who else emerged yesterday as someone who had warned about Chris Pincher's predatory behaviour? Go on, have a wild guess. Who would be the maddest person imaginable to have been reported yesterday? And I don't know whether that means that they briefed the story or they allowed it to be briefed by someone else, or whether Beth Rigby at Sky News stumbled across it without any involvement at all of the person involved. But who would be the maddest person now to be publicly refuting Boris Johnson's ludicrous claims that he had no idea about Chris Pincher's predatory past? Carrie Johnson. Carrie Johnson reported yesterday to have warned about him when she was working in Conservative Central Office. What the hell is going on? And can we please spare a thought at this time for whatever junior member of staff it is in Downing Street currently desperately trying to arrange another trip to Ukraine? Stuart's in Finchley. Stuart, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, Stuart.
I have been a civil servant for the UK government for 17 years. I have served under multiple administrations as a politically neutral civil servant, so Labour administration, Conservative, coalition. In my time in various government departments, I have been a senior government communicator. I never thought the day would come when I'd call up a daytime national radio station and tell the public that these are dangerous times. Do not underestimate how dangerous a point we have reached when you have the government's most senior spokesperson, who is supposedly a politically neutral civil servant, lying consistently on record to journalists and to the public. This is an indication of a failing state. It is dangerous. It must stop. It has to stop now. And my challenge today to Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary of this country, what are you going to do about it? Simon Case, I'm talking to you directly. What are you going to do? Your responsibility is to the government of the day and the public, not to your political masters.
What can he do?
Resign. Now. Do it.
Will he know who you
Walk
are?
away.
Will he recognise your voice when someone plays this to him later?
I doubt it.
Okay.
I mean, I know him.
Sure.
I have worked in a department when he was working there.
Okay.
So I know him. I have worked alongside him, not closely, but yes, I doubt he'll know who I am. But that doesn't make a difference.
No, I just, you know me, Stuart. I'm
speaking on behalf of civil servants here.
I hear you.
It cannot go on.
Can you explain to somebody who is lucky enough not to be immersed in this world, or who has only the vaguest interest in the unfolding sagas of modern politics. Could you explain to them why? Because I guess the person you've referred to, the official spokesperson, is only just dusting off the apology for lying about the parties, right? That was, I mean, there must be a calculation. Well, we got away with that, still in post. We'll try it again. So why today have you reached this point? What is it about the most recent events that has prompted this complete collapse in your faith, if you like?
Yes. So following the Sue Gray report, I felt compelled internally to write to my permanent secretary and directors, and I stopped short of going to the Cabinet Office in Simon Case. Today, what has prompted this phone call and for me to go over the edge is the Simon McDonald, the former permanent secretary in the Foreign Office, who I worked for when I was there, a civil servant of the utmost integrity and honesty, has come out publicly to the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner and said that the information that 10 Downing Street has been issuing to the press and the public is untrue. It is a lie. Now, to see the Justice Secretary this morning, following this letter, Dominic Raab, saying that's not something I recognise or what's to the effect, is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, this is extraordinary.
Because you have
a serving cabinet minister is trying to undermine the integrity of a long-standing senior civil servant who's come out and put his head above the parapet. You know, that is a big deal.
Yes. Why is Dominic Raab doing it?
So, do you know what? I spend a lot of my time. I mean, I think I should be working right now. I should be working right now. I should be serving the country right now doing my job.
You are.
I spend a lot of my time thinking about what can possibly motivate members of the current cabinet to stay in their roles and trot out the lies day in, day out that are handed to them. And it's beyond me. The only rational reasoning I can come to is that they've tied themselves to the Prime Minister for so long that they know in their heart of hearts that their careers are over. That after the Prime Minister's career is finished, theirs is finished too as a cabinet minister. So, I don't. But even then, what?
It's not that big a deal.
It's becoming embarrassing. I mean, how day after day senior cabinet ministers can knowingly go onto the media and lie to the public, knowingly so. And the defence that you hear often from cabinet ministers that's what I was told by Number 10 press office. Yeah. Don't listen to it, it's lies. I know how senior cabinet ministers prepare for major interviews, particularly on Sunday shows. The idea that Theresa Coffey or anyone else, Dominic Raab, in this current climate will go on to a major political TV show or radio show without being briefed at the most senior levels in Number 10, sure, where the political side, the civil service side is wrong. It's not a Number 10 press officers briefing these people. They are being told and being directed by the most senior levels of Number 10. And
of course,
it worries me that if it's civil servants who are feeding this stuff to cabinet ministers, say on the media, are they being told to tell lies, or are they being told this is the truth? Now go and say it. Either way, it's dangerous because, come on, are you trying to tell me? Now, I'm going to speak to Number 10 press office now. I'm speaking Number 10 press office. This is on in your office, and you're listening to me right now. I have worked in press office for the Post government for 16 years. I have had the privilege of working with extremely capable people in Number 10 press office for a number of years, people who I respect highly and who I consider friends, look at yourselves today in the mirror. Look at yourselves right now and tell yourself that what you're being asked to say on behalf of the government is true. Tell yourself that. Okay? And after that, go onto your laptop or computer and look at the Government Communications Service Privacy and Ethics Guidance. What does it say? What does it say about honesty and integrity? You are better than this. You know you are. It has to stop today. And I'm speaking directly to Number 10 Press Office now. Guys, come on. It's over. It is over. Stop it now. Get up from your desks. Walk away. No more. Simon Case, come out today. Make a public statement saying that you have lost all confidence in the political leadership of 10 Downing Street and you can no longer fulfil your role as Cabinet Secretary and Head of Civil Service. How can you? How can you today, after seeing Simon McDonald's letter, how can you possibly continue your role as Cabinet Secretary and Head of the Civil Service, knowing that the Prime Minister that you are working for is overseeing the most corrupt disintegration of our government institutions in modern history? And it is irrefutable now. It is irrefutable. And to the Cabinet, I mean, what do you say to the Cabinet?
I don't know.
You're lost already. You are lost. But now, have some self-respect. Have some self-respect. And today, say, enough is enough. And walk away. Because, James, I mean, I could talk about this all day. I won't bore you.
I don't think there's much danger of that.
I'll finish by saying, do not underestimate. Do not. And I'm speaking to the public now. People listening at home. Do not underestimate how dangerous this is.
Yeah.
Politicians will come onto the media, as they always do, and say people don't care about this stuff. Don't listen to them.
They have to.
I know you care. I know you care. I know you're tired of it. I know it goes. I know that at home all you hear day in, day out is the same old stuff. And politicians will say, "Oh, people don't want to hear about it." Yeah, people don't want to hear about it. They want it to stop. If it stops, they won't hear about it. So my message to the public is: care. Keep on caring. Keep on writing to your local MPs. Get on the phones today and tell them enough is enough, particularly those in Conservative constituencies. Tell them that enough's enough. Keep on caring. And do not, and I cannot underestimate this, and I stress this again, do not underestimate how dangerous a position this country is in when you have the most senior civil servant spokesperson in government lying day after day to the public and to journalists. That is a failed state and a corrupt state.
Stuart, I'd like to thank you for reminding everybody what a patriot sounds like after Liz Truss abused the term so vilely in the House of Commons last week.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's 10:34. Holly Harris has the headlines. 10:36 is the time. I will read out some of the gratitude coming in for that call from Stuart shortly, but I want to crack on with the conversation in hand, which is, it feels a little inadequate now given the passion of that last contribution, but what the hell is happening? And if you were in any doubt about the gravity of the situation in which we find ourselves this morning, I hope it has now been summarily removed, because when you have a member of the House of Lords who until very recently was the most senior civil servant in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, one of the great offices of state, taking to the record, going public with his complaint, his evidence-based, irrefutable complaint that the Downing Street operation from Boris Johnson down are lying to you without a care, without a thought, then that last word from Stuart, that last thought from Stuart about you have to care. How can you not care? What happens next if he walks away from this one? You can't do anything about this. I can't do anything about this. But as Stuart rightly reminded us, people around him can. Simon Case, the head of the civil service, what do you do? Complicity is silence. Silence is complicity. What do you do? This has blown the lid right off what all of us knew to be true but couldn't actually prove beyond reasonable doubt. They are all shoring up, amplifying and defending a proven liar. But a liar at the very highest pinnacle of power in this country. And it's you that they're lying to. It's not lefties or Ramonas or Keir Starmer or Sadiq Khan or, I don't know, Guardianistas or woke liberals. It's you that they're lying to about sexual predation, about promoting and protecting a sexual predator and then lying about it. That's all. Sandra's in Richmond. Sandra, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I have to say, after listening to Stuart, I've not heard anything so powerful from any MP as I just heard from Stuart. I was just left absolutely stunned by what he had to say.
Same.
And what I've got to say maybe doesn't seem quite so important after what he said, but I felt I had to say it today. I've worked for MPs. I worked for one MP for 20 years. I sat in constituency surgeries with him week after week. And I think about Chris Pincher's constituents in Tamworth.
Yes.
It's not that he's an alcoholic. That's something that can be dealt with, and it's an illness.
You mentioned that he's seeking medical help, so we presume that it's in that arena.
I'm not blaming him for that.
Of course.
But the evidence is undeniable that he's a sexual predator. And an MP in a constituent's in his surgery, it's like going to see your doctor. People, the most vulnerable people go to see an MP. I mean, some people go about parking tickets, I admit. But the most vulnerable people...
It's a cross we all have to bear, Sandra.
Yeah.
Go on.
The most vulnerable people come and see you and they're in tears. And you know, you can never, ever speak about what people say to you. But he's not been checked. I mean, no MPs are checked. You know, you don't... I can't remember what the process is, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
no MPs are checked, and they do deal with vulnerable people all the time. And I worry for the people that have been to see him in Tamworth. He is a risk. He should not spend another day as an MP. He should go seek help for his alcoholism. I'm sorry for him about that.
Of course.
But in terms of the predatory behaviour, he's finished as an MP. Nobody should be protecting him. He should be resigning today.
How, with your background and your knowledge of Parliament and MPs, constituency officers, just I don't think it's necessary after Stuart gave us chapter and verse from the civil service perspective, but from the political staffer's perspective, a permanent undersecretary keeping the receipts and going public with proof that Downing Street has dedicated itself to disseminating obvious and proven lies. Just put that into context for us. And is there anything from your 20 years in the job that comes even close to the scale of this corruption?
James, I've been working in politics for 40 years, actually.
Right,
I go back to the early 1980s. Never. This is unheard of. I've never, ever come across anything like this at all. It's just shocking beyond belief.
Thank you, if that's the right word to use. I'm not sure it is, but you know exactly what I mean by it.
But I do worry for the people of Tamworth, because he talks about going back there and resuming his constituencies as soon as possible. He shouldn't go anywhere near any constituent.
Well, do you know, Neil Parish gave an interview yesterday, I think to Lorraine on ITV, and said that it was really his wife and his children that persuaded him to resign, that prompted his resignation. And that I thought was really interesting, because it means there's nobody in the heart of power. There's nobody in government. There's nobody in Boris Johnson's cabal who ever thinks anyone should ever resign about anything. Matt Hancock did it off his own back.
But essentially the problem is partly our system, because it depends on honour.
Yeah.
And if there's no honour, then the system doesn't work. And we have mainly struggled by over the years, because MPs have largely been honourable, or their colleagues have been honourable. But because there is no honour anymore in the government, I don't say across Westminster, I know there is honour, because there is no honour left, everything falls apart because of that.
The centre cannot hold.
Yes, absolutely. That's totally true. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Sandra. And of course, the references Stuart made were not to politicians, but were to civil servants, because they are the final check and balance on honour. The dishonourable conduct that they are now witnessing and, I'm afraid, facilitating, defending and protecting is why Stuart appealed directly to Simon Case and members of the press office to walk away, to do the right thing. I don't know what's going to happen today. Possibly nothing. I've been here before. At least I thought I had, until those first two calls really drove home the fact that this is, even by the standards of Boris Johnson's administration, the lies of Brexit and beyond, this is a new low, a dreadful new low. And if you can say anything at all about Boris Johnson with certainty, it's that however low he goes, he can always go lower. So I don't know if you remember the aftermath of that vote of confidence not long ago, when a lot of MPs who'd broken cover said, the reason I have to vote no confidence is because this isn't going to stop. The only mystery is what the next scandal will be. There is no mystery at all about whether or not there will be another scandal. The only mystery is about what the next scandal will be. And now they know. And it's arguably bigger than any of the scandals that prompted that rather large vote of no confidence, rather small victory in that vote of confidence vote. It's rather larger, I think, than any of the scandals that led up to that point. Because this is it's not often I can't find the words to articulate the gravity of a situation, but this is a corruption of the point of communication, the point of contact between government and the people, right? What comes through the official spokesman? What comes through the press office, to the lobby, to the politician, to the political journalist? It's the point of contact between power and people. And power is lying to the people. 03456060973 is the number you need if you want to join the conversation. It is 10:48, and this speaks for many of you, from John, who's in Chelmsford. James, after listening to Stuart, I have emailed my MP for the first time ever, simply stating that if he does not make a stand to remove Boris and this whole circus, he will not get my vote. This is all I feel I can do. Back to Stuart. Mark in East Bolden writes, your most important caller ever, and probably the best. I have goosebumps listening to this person. I really hope the people he was talking to directly hear this man, because I will certainly be doing my bit by contacting my local MP. The most powerful call on LBC I've ever heard. It's time we took to the street, says Dan in Sandbirch. Well done, sir, says Stephen in Milton Keynes. And another Steve, this is one very brave man. Here is a former Conservative minister, now out of government, who's messaged Tamara Cohen at Sky News with regard to Simon McDonald's intervention this morning. It's highly unusual for this sort of intervention by the past permanent secretary of a department. It must illustrate a final breakdown of any confidence in a number 10 operation which appears to be careless of the truth and throw good ministers under the bus to utter what later become clear as falsehoods. If it illustrates a loss of support from those who really know the inside of how a government works, it could be catastrophic for those maintaining the present charade. I should also, of course, recognise that if you have, as I did many, many moons ago, 14 years ago, if you fell under the Boris Johnson spell, and today is the day on which it's broken, then I'd love to talk to you as well. 0345 6060 973. But the catalogue now of condemnation is actually beyond precedent. Actually beyond, it is beyond belief what has happened this morning, when the man who was in charge of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, when Christopher Pincher was a minister there, categorically contradicting Boris Johnson's claims that he hadn't been aware of any specific allegations, which then, of course, moved to he knew of allegations, but they were either resolved or did not progress to a formal complaint. And Simon MacDonald writing this morning, the original number 10 line is not true and the modification is still not accurate. Mr. Johnson was briefed in person about the initiation and outcome of the investigation. That's next level, because that means he knows when he's telling his spokesman or he's telling his Cabinet Secretary or whoever is going to brief the ministers to go out. Therese Coffey at the weekend, Dominic Raab today. They're going to go out and defend these lies. He knows they're lies and he sends them out to sell them, and they do it. Which makes the footage of the Cabinet meeting this morning, which has somewhat, in my view, unwisely been released. The cameras are in there. It's almost unbelievable to see what looks like, finally, a sense of reality settling on members of the Cabinet, Therese Coffey in particular, looking crestfallen, Michael Gove looking characteristically exuberant, all of them looking as if, it looks like a wake, or possibly the, well-documented footage of a infamous bunker. It looks like a wake, that Cabinet meeting, and there he is in the middle with his contrite face on. Do you think he's run out of road, finally? Darren's in Corby in Northamptonshire. Darren, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello.
I shall try and be as eloquent as your first two callers and Stuart for Prime Minister and all that.
And all that.
But I think, two main worries for me, James. I've been mulling it all over all morning, what's happened, and there's two massive concerns jumping for me that I'd like to share. One, it's the rate of lies that are coming at us. I could be speaking to you in 2 weeks. I could have spoke to you last month, and we'd be talking about lies coming from Johnson and the government. And it's the rate that they're coming at us. It's like a whack-a-mole machine.
Yes.
You just deal with one thing, and another one pops up.
Yes.
And I'm at the stage, I think, similar to yourself, where if the truth is a shield, it is being absolutely peppered at the moment. So do we stop it being peppered, or do we just stand back and watch that shield break? We've got a bit of a choice now, aren't we? What do we do?
Well, there's not a lot we can do. What can we do, apart from write to our MPs or contribute to radio phone-in programmes or even, I suppose, present them? There's not a lot else. John in Chelmsford, that line there at the end of John's message, this is all I feel I can do. After contacting his MP for the very first time in his life, it's down to people. It's down to cabinet ministers, ideally, or it's down to the head of the civil service. It's down to members of his inner circle to say enough is enough, and I don't know whether they will or not. And that, of course, is leading us inevitably back to that cull in 2019, the appointment of sycophants and yes men and women to the cabinet, and the cull of all the but not all the MPs, as we saw during the vote of no confidence, but any MPs who might have been publicly recognised as possessing integrity or honesty. He got rid of them all. It's incredible.
It is. I think at a stage where they bought into the lie so much, you're trapped. You've defended the lies, you've defended the individuals, you've staked your reputation on it. You're in that deep. Is there no way out? You're caught in it now.
The double down theory, or there's a phrase for it, isn't there? I always forget what it is. But that idea of I've invested so much, sunk cost fallacy. I've invested so much in this that even as the evidence that I have invested in a complete fraud becomes incontrovertible, I simply can't admit it because it poses an existential threat to my character.
Absolutely. You're caught into the lie that much. Surely there must be some. I've listened to Dominic Raab this morning. And
I might play a couple of clips of that later, actually, in the next hour.
You're thinking, why are you doing this? And, flipping it on its head, you think, would Johnson defend you like that? Probably not.
No. That's the only thing I think the only point he didn't make. That is such a powerful point. What do you think Boris Johnson would do if it was you? Actually, do you know, there is a brilliant piece by Hugo Rifkin in the Times today, which is a very common occurrence. But it talks about he will overlook anything if you're loyal. So he would never do anything that would damage himself exactly in order to protect you if he thought he could get away with it. So it is that sense of what would he do if Dominic Raab was in sorts of trouble. To be fair, because they've sold their souls to him, he might actually display some loyalty to them.
And unless they're not useful to him anymore.
Right, unless they told the truth about him, in which case he'd chuck them out faster than you can say. And now I wish I could think of the name of a politician who had told Rory Stewart. There you go. They chuck him out faster than you can say Rory Stewart.
So back to your point, James, wasn't it? When you say, once that loyalty's gone, then you're discarded like a a big discarded thing.
A great big discarded thing. You're absolutely right. Aaron, thank you. Sorry, go on.
Thanks very much, James.
No, you take care. Thank you. 10:56 is the time. If you're trying to get through and you can't, grab that phone line that Darren's just vacated. 0345 606 0973. I'm not going to labour the point or over-egg the pudding, but if today's the day that the spell of Boris Johnson broke for you and reality is rushing in like so much floodwater, then I'm here for you on 0345 606 0973. Jane's in Melton Mowbray. Jane, what would you like to say?
Well, I was a magistrate for 33 years, and I can tell you that from day one, before he was even elected as Prime Minister, I could see that this man was a liar. You get to know these things, but you obviously listen to the evidence, and all the evidence said that this man was a liar. I refer to Mr. Johnson, our Prime Minister.
I don't know that qualifies as a sixth sense, Jane. It just means you were paying attention.
Well, absolutely. In that case, I would say. And I did write to my MP, and I have to say my MP is one of the ones who's had courage to come out and say that this is not the way public life should be conducted. And I respect her for that. I have to say, though, I'm ringing up because my concern is about democracy.
Yes.
We are renowned for fighting for democracy. And this is part of our agenda in supporting President Zelensky and all that he's courageously doing for us. They are fighting for us in Ukraine because if Russia wins, then off we go. Now, my concern is that Boris Johnson has been seen on the international stage, of course, he loves that, and he has been to Ukraine and seen alongside President Zelensky fighting for democracy, fighting Russia away. But the fact of the matter is that Boris Johnson is actually batting against democracy. He's batting for Putin because Putin lies to his people and they swallow it. If not, they get put in prison. We haven't quite got to that, but there are wavering bits around the edge. But Boris Johnson is feeding lies to us.
That's a really good point, actually. I hadn't seen it quite that clearly
And those
before.
lies are what anti-democratic procedures are built on.
Well, that's the point of contact between the power and the people. When power is lying to the people, we are more like Putin than Zelensky.
Absolutely.
Good grief.
And
you haven't exactly cheered me up, Jane.
I'm sorry.
That's quite all right, I'm used to it.
That's what very much depresses me.
I'm sure it does. And of course, that question about breaking spells perhaps becomes more pertinent. A lot of you pointing out that the callers we've taken in the first hour of the programme today are quite possibly among the finest that we've ever taken. But, cometh the hour, cometh the man and woman. It's a mark of how serious this territory is. A few of you also reminding me that none of this will land and then you can choose your constituency. Is it the Red Wall, or is it outside the Westminster bubble, or with the Boris Johnson fan club? And that's not really relevant today because it's about the people who are capable of changing their minds, people who are capable of changing course, whether they are Cabinet Secretary in Simon Case's case, or Cabinet members, or simply supporters. The conversations that we have on this programme are about people who have minds that are capable of changing. It is 3 minutes after 11, and I think by way of light relief, actually I need to check that the story's true. James, it is interesting that you persecute Boris Johnson but do not mention Dizzy Rascal. Is it because you are politically correct? Asked Jonathan, interested. I play a game sometimes, usually off air, occasionally on air. Is that a joke I do not get, or a joke that's not very good? Or is that somebody who is actually allowed to use scissors? Jonathan, interested. It's interesting that you persecute Boris Johnson but do not mention Dizzy Rascal, who I think was in the news a couple of months ago for receiving a community order for assaulting his ex-fiancée. I mean, how racist would you have to be to think that talking about the egregious behaviour of a white prime minister in terms is somehow biased because you haven't mentioned a black musician's run-in with the law from 2 months ago? That is literally how these people operate. It's how their minds work. It's incredible. But anyway, Jonathan, thank you for bringing a smile to my face and Keith this morning. It was Keith that spotted that little contribution to the programme. Should we have a little bit of Dominic Raab time? I think we should. He's been doing the rounds this morning. And Stuart, the civil servant who rang in earlier I don't know what the word is. I mean, in shock almost at just how low we've been brought this morning by news from the former Undersecretary, the Permanent Secretary at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, that Boris Johnson and indeed everybody in Downing Street has been lying about what he knew and didn't know about the allegations. I think we should remind ourselves of what it actually sounds like. But before I do that, let me run through the timeline. There's currently 2 phone lines free if you want to get involved. Be quick, 0345 60 973. So it was last Friday that it was reported the Prime Minister had been informed of allegations against Pincher before appointing him. This was the sort of morning after Pincher had resigned and disgraced himself at the spiritual home of conservatism. And the Prime Minister's spokesman said initially, I'm going to quote this, that the Prime Minister was, quote, not aware of any allegations, end quotes. Right? So I can't imagine many people listening to this are still trying to defend him or pretend that this isn't a big deal. But just in case you are, pay attention, all right? Stop obsessing about Dizzy Rascal and concentrate on this. So that was the first quote, not aware of any allegations, the key word being any allegations. That's what Power told the people on Friday, okay? That then changed. He corrected himself and clarified that he meant specific allegations. So the Prime Minister was not aware of any specific allegations. That is the second line of defence, the second lie. He elaborated by insisting that, and I quote, in the absence of any formal complaint, it was not appropriate to stop the appointment on the basis of unsubstantiated claims. This was Friday. 2 lies in one day. Lie number 1, he was not aware of any allegations. Lie number 2, he was not aware of any specific, actually 3 lies, any specific allegations. Lie number 3, the claims that he was aware of were unsubstantiated. 3 lies, 1 day. Take the weekend off, come back on Monday. After this, Sunday, Times publishes details of how an MP raised a specific incident with an aide at number 10 and the incoming chief whip as long ago as February. So Monday, in response to that story, the Prime Minister's spokesman said that the Prime Minister had been aware of, quote, media reports and, quote, some allegations that were either resolved or did not progress to a formal complaint. A lie. 2 days, 4 lies now. And that he deemed it wouldn't be right to block the appointment in the absence of any formal complaint. Another lie. 2 days, 5 lies. Unbelievable. It's still only Monday. Fast forward to today, the BBC reports that Johnson and Dominic Raab were told of a formal complaint about Pincher, which crucially triggered a disciplinary process that confirmed Pincher's misconduct in 2018. Wow. Raab, who the BBC has reported was informed of this complaint, has spent the morning denying that any of these complaints were either made or triggered a disciplinary process. And this chronology culminates now in the intervention from Lord MacDonald, Simon MacDonald, as he was when he was Permanent Undersecretary at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. I'll just give you the key line here. The original number 10 line is not true and the modification is still not accurate. Of course, the independent advisor on ministerial interest would ordinarily be investigating this like Inspector Clouseau. Actually, that's a bad example. Inspector Gadget, Sherlock Holmes. The investigation would be in full swing, but guess what? There is no independent advisor on ministerial interests because the last one, Christopher Geidt, quit on June the 16th. And the bloke he replaced, Alexander Allen, quit after Boris Johnson refused to respond meaningfully to his investigation into Priti Patel being a vicious bully. Come on. How much more do you need? We haven't even got an independent advisor on ministerial standards because the last one quit over Boris Johnson's determination to break international law with regards to tariffs and World Trade Organization rules. I don't know if that qualifies as international law technically, but that's why he resigned. And he was only in the job because the one before resigned after Boris Johnson refused to protect civil servants who'd been bullied by Priti Patel. And now we haven't got one at all, which is probably why McDonnell's written to the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards. I wonder how long she'll last, Catherine Stowe. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. So let's have a little listen to Rob doing the rounds this morning. Shall we start with him on Sky News, where I think Kay Burley, two doyens of British broadcasting for you now, Kay Burley and Susanna Reid, both putting him through the mill. But here he is being reminded of reality.
There's a pattern of behaviour, isn't there? 2012, 2013, 2017, 2019, September 2019, 2021, October 2021, December 2021, June 2022. Is that really somebody who is an appropriate person to be laying down the law as Deputy Chief Whip?
Well, you've just read out a list of dates, and I don't know what each one referred to, but all I can say is where there's been a credible complaint made, they've been followed up, whether it was by me in the Foreign Office or in 2017, there was a QC that conducted the process. I think that's right. There is a rumour mill in Westminster, and I think it's important both for the confidence of victims, but also fairness, that you have independent processes. And I think that's absolutely... I mean, what you're complaining about is that we've been too loyally and done it too much by the book.
I'm not complaining at all. I'm trying to get down to the bottom of what's going on.
But I think it is important to be absolutely rigorous and scrupulously go by the book. And of course, in relation to Chris Pincher's appointment as Deputy Chief Whip, the Cabinet Office Propriety and Ethics team did not raise an objection to that appointment. We rely on these independent processes because they're capable of commanding the trust of those with which we work, and that is the crucial thing in all this case.
I've got to wonder where the bar is, though. How high are we setting or low are we setting this bar?
Well, I don't think it's right that just because there's rumour and gossip, someone loses their job. I do think...
Of course not.
No, I do think it is right that when a complaint is made, it is properly investigated, and then you know, is it serious enough, is it credible enough to warrant formal action, whether it's disciplinary or under the ministerial code. I think that's the right bar to set.
Over to Simon MacDonald. In the summer of 2019, shortly after he was appointed Minister of State at the Foreign Office, a group of officials complained to me about Mr Pincher's behaviour. I discussed the matter with the relevant official at the Cabinet Office. In substance, the allegations were similar to those made about his behaviour at the Carlton Club. An investigation upheld the complaint. Mr Pincher apologised and promised not to repeat the inappropriate behaviour. Over to Susanna Reid.
How does somebody who is found guilty by an internal investigation of inappropriate behaviour, because a number of officials complain, how does that somebody, Chris Pincher in this case, get to be Deputy Chief Whip with responsibility for welfare?
You say found guilty. Actually, no formal disciplinary action was taken.
An investigation upheld the complaint. An investigation upheld the complaint.
Sorry, Susanna, you're wrong about what happened, and it's important to clarify. It's absolutely true. An investigation took place. I was clear we needed to understand the substance to these claims and what had happened. But in terms of
I'm not sure what we're arguing about here, Mr. Rubb.
Well, you're using the word guilty. Yeah. You're using the word guilty, and that's simply wrong.
So what does an investigation upheld the complaint of inappropriate behaviour for which Mr Pincher then apologised mean?
So I'll tell you exactly what it means if you allow me to complete the answer. It means a complaint was made. And I should also say that, but that's often the case in these types of things, the complainant did not want formal action taken. The Permanent Secretary and I agreed it must be properly looked at to determine the veracity of the claims and the context and the circumstances. It was clear the behaviour was inappropriate, unprofessional, but it did not trip the wire of severity to warrant formal disciplinary process.
Mr. Rubb, what you did in response is one thing. The fact of the matter is, a complaint about inappropriate behaviour was made, an investigation was undertaken, and the complaint was upheld.
No, I agree with that. It's your use of the word guilty, which you wouldn't use for...
was he guilty of inappropriate behaviour or not?
He was found... the claim was found to be substantiated, but we didn't...
So he was guilty of inappropriate behaviour?
No, Susanna, guilty is a very loaded term, and whilst it's clear that there was inappropriate...
Sorry, inappropriate behaviour is a pretty loaded term, Mr Rubb.
Sorry, if you
And
allow
he
me,
was
Susanna,
found to
you
have
always
behaved
do this. Let me give
Well,
you the
ask
account, and
questions.
your viewers can make up their mind. I'm always happy to answer difficult
we'll leave
questions.
it to the viewers. Yeah, go ahead.
So the investigation into the facts substantiated, upheld the complaint, but no formal disciplinary action was taken. And the Cabinet Office, and I wanted that extra assurance, confirmed that there would be no action under the Ministerial Code of Conduct.
It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. I'm going to leave you with an anxiety dream. I'll be back in a couple of minutes where we'll continue this conversation. I'm keen, if you're interested, to also return to the question of Keir Starmer's Brexit announcements yesterday. I feel the dust settling a little and perhaps my mind changing from where I was yesterday, although I'm not 100% sure. Let's say I'm 48% in favour of what he's done, but I think I'm winnable. Imagine being falsely accused of a terrible crime, and then turning up in court to discover that Dominic Raab is your lawyer. 17 minutes after 11, and just in case you're interested, Grant Shapps has made a little film announcing the towns and cities that will compete for the honour of being crowned the home of GB Railways. And he's put that out in the last couple of hours. No, me neither. But I think everyone should vote for Doncaster. I don't know why. It's where my first home was. When I was brought home by Mum and Dad, it was to a little house in Doncaster. So I think that would be the best place. It also, of course, I think, sits in the shadow of the RMT Union's Education Centre, which might be amusing. I played you those clips of Raab. I'm still reeling from the letter that Simon MacDonald published this morning. But Raab is a snake, isn't he? I shouldn't talk like this, but I'm afraid when the occasion demands it, you have to. This is absolutely gross what's happening now. And people like Raab and Patel and Dorries and the rest of them are absolutely complicit in it. I suppose you're going to allow me a pontification. I should warn Nathan in Nottingham, who's up next, but I won't. I'll try not to talk unduly. But I suppose that none of us ever know when we're rubbish, do we? You know, I'm lucky in this job in that we have fairly reliable metrics as to at least how many people are listening to the programme. But imagine if you didn't. Imagine if there were no ratings and I came into work every day convinced that I was the best thing since sliced bread. And I must be the best thing since sliced bread because I've got this job. I'm in this studio. I'm behind this microphone. And there was never any way really of measuring whether or not anybody was listening, let alone hundreds of thousands or millions of people. Who would know they were rubbish? Some people would. Some people suffer from terrible insecurity. Some really brilliant and talented people have no idea how good they are or how talented they are. But some of us perhaps have a slightly overinflated idea of how good we are. But what if you just have no clue about how rubbish you are? So we sit here thinking, how can Priti Patel and Dominic Raab and Nadine Dorries and Therese Coffey and all the rest of them, how can they do this? And we conclude, somewhat insultingly, but I think accurately, that they are slavishly supportive of the Prime Minister because they know they couldn't get arrested in any other administration, which seems like a neat, pat answer to the question. How on earth can they do this? And the answer is self-interest. But maybe they think that they're part of some magnificent project. Maybe they are so stupid that they honestly think that they're the good guys and that their talents have finally been recognised, you know, and that Boris Johnson's genius is such that he's the one that's seen them finally in their true light. Nadine Dorries, the genius, finally recognised by Boris Johnson. Priti Patel, the magnificent arbiter of morality and law, finally recognised by Boris Johnson. Maybe Dominic Raab thinks Boris Johnson is the guy for the job because anyone clever enough to appoint me, Dominic Raab, as Deputy Prime Minister must be brilliant. Maybe it's a little bit more complicated than naked self-interest and being as thick as mince. Maybe there are more subtle things unfolding. I don't know. But I do care. And that, of course, is the trick. You heard a clip already of Jacob Rees-Mogg talking to Andrew Marr on LBC last night. And Andrew, I felt very efficiently putting him through the mangle. Someone else last night, a little later in the day, over on Newsnight, actually finally held his feet to the fire about the ludicrous claims regarding vaccines and Brexit. It was a pleasure to witness. It's been a long time coming, and I know most people who listen to this programme are aware of the facts, even though the Prime Minister and all of his most committed, dedicated acolytes continue to claim that leaving the European Union somehow meant that we could do with vaccines things that we couldn't do while in the European Union. I know that's a lie, and you know that's a lie, but there have been times when you genuinely wondered whether Jacob Rees-Mogg knew that was a lie. Again, how could I have missed him off the list of people so stupid that they don't realise how stupid they are? So fair play to Kirsty Walk on Newsnight last night for actually reminding Jacob Rees-Mogg of, well, just reality.
I've already mentioned the vaccine, but
look... The vaccine, can I just hold on to the vaccine just for 1 second? We were in the transition period, and it was absolutely up to any country could have done that in the vaccine. It was nothing to do with leaving the EU. Isn't that correct?
We were the only country...
But we chose to.
We were the only country. So all these other countries could have chosen to, but no member state, full member state of the European Union did.
But we chose to because we were always free to do it as a member state.
Bear in mind, Sir Keir Starmer was calling at the time for us to join in with the EU. It was not a popular decision at the time. It was a bold decision because we were free.
No, you were in the transition period. You could have done it if you were absolutely the heart of Europe.
Nobody did.
But it was nothing to do with leaving the EU.
It was.
It wasn't. Absolutely any other member state could have done it. In fact, I think Malta and Hungary pursued a course that was slightly at odds with the rest of the EU. And of course, for people who care about such things, if you actually look at the success of the rollout and where we are now, we are no longer in the lead. A little brief head start is roughly what we describe. But finally, hearing someone point out to Jacob Rees-Mogg that he's talking through his top hat again. Is that spell broken yet? I don't know. I mean, that's the point, isn't it? If you can lie about Brexit and you can lie about vaccines and you can lie about parties and you can lie about laws and you can lie about relationships and you can lie... I mean, why wouldn't you lie about a sexual predator who you've promoted and protected despite knowing about the substantiated allegations that have been levelled against him? I think that Susanna Reid is brilliant. By the way, I think she's absolutely superb. She got somewhat, I don't know if overshadowed is quite the right word, but people watching that programme, Good Morning Britain, were often distracted by sort of ludicrous fireworks and I suppose narcissism, which is something a lot of presenters are subject to. But Susanna just gets on with being brilliant day in, day out, and her questioning of politicians is right up there. Which is why, of course, Dominic Raab patronised her. I suppose we should just be grateful he didn't wink at her like he did at Angela Rayner in the House of Commons on Wednesday. Unbelievable. But here we are, 24 after 11. Nathan is in Nottingham. Nathan, I'll steer you back to the overarching question that we ask so often on this programme. What's going on?
Well, I'll start with a thank you, James. It's a lot less daunting to follow Dominic Raab, a reference to Graham Shapps and Jacob Rees-Mogg than it is possibly the ultimate Ray Liotta that you had this morning.
Beautifully put.
I think, like you started, the reason I've called, apart from being inspired by Stuart earlier, you're asking a question that I think, to your credit, you've answered a long time ago, a good few years ago. You referenced must be 5 years since you first referenced Brexit has broken everything. And the phrase, if they get away with this, then what will they try and get away with next? And the reality is we are the only country that I can think of that has an entire geopolitical policy and leadership that is entirely built on lies and fabrication and nonsense and the fantasy that is Brexit. And so I suppose it stands to reason that continual degradation of our standards will just continue because those people got away with it in the first place.
I mean, you're right. It is not a theory that I am unfamiliar with. But is it because, people like Grant Shapps and Liz Truss must know that Brexit's a disaster, but that supporting it and championing it is in their self-interest. I think Keir Starmer probably is open to that accusation as of this week. But they're not really championing it and defending it. They're kind of just not saying the quiet bit out loud. It's rubbish, but we're going to make the best of it, which is a slightly different approach. So can you conceive of a universe, or at least a cabinet, in which Brexit had been sold to people on the back of epic and egregious lies, but somehow it didn't then bleed into every other area of government? Do you see what I mean? Because I see the tentacles reaching into every department, reaching into every member of the cabinet, the cull in 2019, the dismissal of people like Philip Hammond and Rory Stewart. I mean, clearly something really ugly happened right under our noses, and clearly attempting to disown the withdrawal agreement before the ink was even dry on it, even though that would break international law, is evidence that just as the vaccines had nothing to do with Brexit, so the claim that he got Brexit done is rollicks as well. But could there have been a sort of a semi-permeable membrane put around Brexit that didn't then leach out into every other area of government? I don't know that I agree with you completely that this level of lying was always inevitable as a consequence of Brexit. I probably do, but I don't know for sure that I do. I've bored him to death. Have we lost the line? Is Nathan still there? That's the point. Try and get Nathan, but don't worry. We'll talk to Kieran, who's in Brighton. That's. Oh, sorry, Nathan, you are still there.
Yes,
I don't know what happened there. What was? Did I bore you to death? I mean, thankfully, he's still on life support. Back again. The bit. Could there have been? I should have just said the question a little more shortly. Could we have ring-fenced Brexit in a way that, although we all know it's lies, it wouldn't have rendered the next round of lies and the next round of lies and the next round of lies inevitable?
No, I think you there describe the Johnson effect, don't you? The effect of an individual who is as depraved as all of the evidence suggests that he is, not least the most recent evidence in the last week or so.
Yeah.
So
that's it. So it's not Brexit that rendered this level of lying inevitable, it's Johnson.
Well, and also, obviously, once we went down the path of freedom of movement with Brexit, that obviously ruled out all other vaguely sensible possibilities in securing some sort of agreement that may not have harmed the country as badly as it did. And I suppose that also, for me, would feed down the path. Once we pretended that was a good idea, that also led to the requirement to continue to lie.
And to silence or at least or even expel all dissenting voices. And that, of course, was on Theresa May's watch, not on Boris Johnson's. But that idea of it's not the lies about Brexit that have rendered the current round of corruption inevitable. It's actually the presence of Boris Johnson in Downing Street. But Boris Johnson wouldn't have been in Downing Street without Brexit and the lies that he told and everybody. So, you try and unravel those two. You try and separate those two phenomena from each other, Brexit and Boris Johnson, because I can't. Nathan, thank you. It's coming up to 11:30. Right, you decide now. We could continue with this, although I suspect we'll be returning to it tomorrow, or we could move on to the Leader of the Opposition, who yesterday laid out his so-called Brexit plan, which before I saw it, I was very cautiously and reluctantly supportive of. The idea that they cannot currently campaign upon a ticket to rejoin the European Union or even join the single market, as Sadiq Khan and Tobias Ellwood, sitting on both sides of British politics, have called for the country to do. You know, and I know, or rather I know and you probably know, that would be the single most sensible thing any government could do in this country, but we are not currently a sensible country. We are a corrupted country. We are a broken democracy with a liar leading us. So I'm afraid that the path back to normality and good sense is not short, and it is not easy. And Keir Starmer's calculation is that he cannot currently campaign on a ticket that doesn't in any way endorse Brexit. He has to be Brexity. He has to back it. I don't know, really. I mean, I say 52-48 a lot of the time as a joke because it's such an infernal ratio. But I think on this occasion I genuinely am. So do you want to talk about that next, or would you rather continue with this conversation about this historic day in the history of British politics and indeed in the normalisation of blatant lies being passed from power to the people? If we do continue, we'll only take it up to 12 and we move on to Keir Starmer at 12 o'clock probably, Starmer and Brexit. So just text me, Starmer or Johnson, to 84850 and I will take a democratic decision. Although I'll tell you this, for nothing, if it comes in at 52-48, then I'm taking my microphone home. Here's Holly Harris with the headlines. 33 minutes after 11, it's only gone and been a landslide. I mean, a genuine landslide. Johnson. Liar-in-Chief Johnson, please. Starmer. Keep the debate going on Johnson, please. Top quality calls today. Johnson. Brexit, James, please. Johnson. Please carry on with Johnson. The quality of callers today is second to none. That's from Brian in Poole. Carry on talking. Yeah, thank you. I know what his initials stand for, Dean. Just wrote to my MP in Chelmsford. This is good as well. And a few people make this point, from Sarah, who's in Poynton. Let's keep talking about Johnson. I'm gathering my thoughts and ideas on what to put in my lengthy email to my Conservative MP. Please keep up the amazing work. Long-time listener, first-time texter. Thank you. What do you think's going on here? And let's do that now. Let's take a little step back. So what you have is a Downing Street operation so completely corrupt that the former most senior civil servant in the Foreign Office has felt compelled to go public with the evidence-based accusation is not a strong enough term, as proof. The most senior civil servant, the former most senior civil servant in the Foreign Office, has felt compelled to go public with proof that Boris Johnson and everybody around him has lied to the public about the sexual predation of Chris Pincher, who he appointed to Deputy Chief Whip, a senior position with responsibility, among other things, for helping people who had complaints about the sexual predation of Conservative MPs, would you believe? And he knew about the allegations, some of which are substantiated, before he made the appointment. He then lied about it, and then he lied again, and then he lied again, and then he told a different lie, and then he lied again. And when I say he, I mean his spokesperson or the minister sent out to defend him or anybody essentially charged with defending the indefensible. So should we just do a little bit on how that happens? One of the most interesting calls we took on Friday, I think it was, I think it might be Kieran. Kieran in Brighton, did you ring me on Friday?
No, I didn't, no.
You're not the guy from HR?
No. Although I have worked in HR.
Well, I'll be with you momentarily, I promise. But there was a caller on Friday from Brighton. That was the only reason I just made that strange little interlude, who worked in human resources, talking about what would happen in his workplace if somebody was even accused of what Christopher Pincher had already apologised for and resigned as Deputy Chief Whip. And it was hard not to conclude that in any other job you'd be shown the door, but not in Boris Johnson's cabal, not in Boris Johnson's administration. There you just sort of get shuffled to one side and probably a return to the front line again after you've served your time in Purda. So how does this happen? That's what fascinates me the most, this question of how do you have... Because one person, one massive liar, you can understand, but how does he manage to infect everybody around him? It was Alfie in Brighton, wasn't it, on Friday? Apologies. Here is Kieran in Brighton. Sorry to build you up like that, Kieran. I can only apologise. What made you pick up the phone?
Well, first, James, I've been listening to the show since I've been one of those lockdown listeners. I've been listening for a couple of years working from home.
Thank you. Welcome.
And I would say 6 months ago, I thought, right, this is it. Johnson's finished.
Right.
It's over.
Yeah.
It's over. And then 4 months ago, I thought, no, this is the one. This is the moment. And then last month, I thought, this is the moment. Yes. When is the moment going to be? I mean, this is the thing that, really, really strikes me. And I was on holiday last week and embarrassed to be English. It's got to that point. And when you think about, this guy that took over the government, he was never voted in. He's never been a great leader. He's never shown the true attributes of a great leader. I work in performance management.
He was voted in December. You mean when he took the job in June, he wasn't. He was voted in only by Conservative MPs. Exactly. But I mean, his mandate's not in question now, is it? Post December 2019.
But if you look at his style as a leader. I mean, I've worked in performance management for many years. I've worked at national newspapers and regional newspapers. Right. And one of the things that's really, really clear about Johnson is that there's a really interesting piece of research that French and Raven did in the 1959, sort of 1960, was around what makes a great leader. And one of the powerful things of what makes a great leader is their personality, their reference style. It can be really dangerous. So Boris Johnson is back in the day when he was a journalist back at the Times, and even when he was Mayor Lord of London,
he wasn't at the Times for very long. He was fired from the Times for making up quotes from his own godfather, and then he pitched up at the Telegraph.
That front page story, I remember. Yeah. And I worked at the Telegraph in 2005, so I think it was just after his time. Yeah. But the interesting thing about this is his personality was something that always got him through. Now, if you think about it now, his personality is causing him to distribute, because essentially what he's done is he's lied his way through everything he's ever done. And I was so embarrassed to hear Dominic Raab this morning, talking to Susanna Reid. It was the most embarrassing moment. And they must all sit there in the cabinet thinking, when is this ever going to end? How's it ever going to end? But there seems to be no end in sight because nobody can hold them to account. There's nothing we can do. And I called earlier on this morning, actually, and spoke to one of your researchers. I was choking on my toast because I felt so terribly sorry for you because, at some point you've been campaigning hard for this. And it's not because you're biased towards Boris Johnson whatsoever. It's just because the injustice is enormous. And at some point, the British people are going to have to decide that enough's enough. And I was even thinking the other day, would imagine if MPs just walked out of Parliament and said, look, enough's enough. This is absolutely ludicrous. How long can this go on for? How long can people lie for him?
That's the crucial question. And like you, going back even further, I've wondered whether we've reached breaking point on countless occasions in the last 14 years. And I think that if the vote of confidence had happened tonight, he wouldn't pass it. But he got over the line just before another scandal broke, another scandal washed up on the shores of the Conservative Party. I think that if the investigation into the parties or the conclusion of that saga had been swifter when public fury was not dissipating and abating and people were not being told it was fluff and it was time to move on, then he'd have been toast then. It certainly feels like it's edging ever closer and each narrow escape is narrower than the last one. But what I don't know, Kieran, is what happens next. And this is what the first call of the day, Stuart, really focused my mind upon in the breaks and in the downtime. What I'm really thinking about is if they get away with this, what the hell do they get away with next?
No, it's a disaster. And if you think about it, your caller from Brighton, funny enough, I've worked in HR for a while as well. And one of the when you interview someone for a role, you do a competency-based interview. What are your skills? Give me an example of what you've done, how it works. This referent power, this personality that gets politicians into power, is a disaster because essentially often they're voted in by the people because they like what they say. They never, ever deliver on their promises. And Brexit, I won't get you started on Brexit because I know that makes your sort of veins in your head bulge. But there were so many lies and untruths that were given as why we should leave the European Union. And I think it's got to the point now where it's just enough's enough. And I think if you think about the skills, I think Parliament and the way that MPs are recruited or even allowed to become a member of Parliament needs to be looked at. There needs to be some reforms because in any other role, there would be a list of competencies. I don't know
that you can. I think we could have in a different electoral system, but I think the selection of candidates has to reside with the constituency parties and approved lists coming from central office. I can't see any other way of doing it, to be honest with you, but of course,
if you think about it, if I want to drive a lorry, I have to pass an HGV test. If I want to drive a plane, I've got to go to a school and do 10,000 hours of flying. If I want to be a member of Parliament, there's some checks and balances, but there's nothing robust.
No, but that was also true when we didn't have a generation of absolute clown cars in government, wasn't it? The system was the same, and then now pick your favourite period of British political history, and I'd point out the system was the same then. So I don't know. I think that's the point about the system is it is not built any more than the American Constitution was written to accommodate somebody as disgusting as the current leader in our case and the last leader in America's case. It was simply not contemplated, which is why people thank you, Kieran, and thank you for the kind words. Don't worry about my forehead, bulging or otherwise. That's why Simon MacDonald has done something unprecedented. And in fact, the more I think about it, the more significant this intervention becomes. Because extraordinary times call for extraordinary actions. And no one is prepared to do anything extraordinary. We are all bound by convention and tradition. And a man comes along and assumes power who is not bound by convention, and he will lie in circumstances when no previous Prime Minister would have lied. It doesn't make every previous Prime Minister infallible or perfect or paragons of virtue, but he will do things that nobody else would contemplate doing. Not just in power, but in private life, in professional life. He will do things that nobody else in a comparable position would ever have contemplated doing. And therefore, the system cannot cope. It's not just what his teacher said about him thinking it churlish for us to expect him to be bound by the obligations that bind the rest of us. It's more than that. It's what happens to that network of obligations when someone treats it with such contempt. You've got a network of obligations that essentially holds a society together. Some of it is codified, formal, written down. Some of it is not. The silent assumption, the basic assumption, the premise of a functioning democracy is that we will all abide by some of these unwritten rules. And you could call those unwritten rules decency. Some of them are written, of course, when it comes to ministerial standards, and he's crapped all over those. But some of them are not written. For example, don't tell huge lies. The presumption is you don't need to write that down. You don't need to have it on the wall in Downing Street saying, oh, by the way, don't tell massive lies to everybody all the time. No one ever thinks for a minute you need to tell a Prime Minister, don't tell massive lies to everybody all the time. And then along comes a Prime Minister who tells massive lies to everybody all the time, up to and including the Queen. Ha! Forgot about that. Up to and including the Queen. And the system can't cope. What does the system do? Oh, I'm going to write to my MP. Well, I'm going to ask an urgent question in the House of Commons. Well, I'm going to commission that. I'm going to write to the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards. Well, I'm going to write to the Independent Advisor on Minister. Oh, I can't, can I? Because he's lost 2 in 3 years. The normal system cannot cope with such abnormal behaviour. So what Simon MacDonald has had to do is do something that you're not supposed to do. He's had to move beyond the convention and beyond the tradition. And he's had to recognise that the unwritten rules, the silent rules that everybody thought was so obvious that they didn't need to be stated, when they are broken, you have to do things you do not do in ordinary times. Because there isn't a sign on the wall in Downing Street saying don't tell massive lies to all of the people all of the time. But he's doing it. So Simon MacDonald has to come forward and say, up with this, I will not put. And thank God that somebody somewhere has found the simplest integrity to do that. Thank God. Because I was beginning to wonder where it was going to come from. You can resign, of course, but you essentially get waved out the door. How do you think Johnson responds to another independent advisor on ministerial ethics resigning in protest at his disgusting behaviour? Answer, don't let the door smack you on the backside on the way out. Hey, we may not even bother hiring a new one. Hey. What can you do? That's why this man has done this thing. And I said it to Stuart, and I'll say it about Simon MacDonald as well. After Liz Truss debased the term in the vilest of fashion in the House of Commons last week, this is what a patriot looks like. It's 10 to 12. Hand on heart, if you told me it was 10 past 10, I'd have believed you. Seriously, apart from obviously excising from my memory all the calls that have already come in, but in the sense of how speedily time passes when we find ourselves in genuinely uncharted waters. Tom Swarbrick's just tweeted, remarkable, and Tom has impeccable contacts in the political world, the Conservative Party in particular, because he used to work for Theresa May. This from a Tory MP. We are eking out the final hours and days of this government. We aren't talking about weeks or months. But then you go back to Kieran in Brighton, who has had that sense 4 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, 4 months ago, 1 year. Unbelievable. And then I've got this problem. No, not that one. This one. I've got this problem with Brexit, as you know. Is I don't really know how much it matters that you get rid of the current driver of the car when the car is the corruption of Brexit. But anyway, here we are, still inevitably discussing this astonishing situation. 10 to 12 is the time. Bernard is in Wandsworth. Bernard, what would you like to say?
Yes, good morning to you, Nick.
Hello, it's James. I'll come back to you in a minute, Bernard. Just bear with me. Jay's in Stratford. Jay, what would you like to say?
Yeah, good morning. Just in relation to the interview with Susanna Reid on Good Morning Britain this morning, Dominic Raab made a big thing of talking about what he did in the way of escalating the complaints previously about Chris Pincher.
Yeah.
He took great offence to the fact when Susanna used the word guilty.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the opposite of guilty is innocent, so if he's got to be one of the two.
Oh, the unsubstantiated is the opposite of substantiated, and they were substantiated, so guilty is a perfectly appropriate word to use.
Exactly.
It was weird, that, wasn't it? I mean, genuinely weird.
It was very. It just goes how low people scrape the barrel just to try and defend the indefensible. But one of the things I put, I'm sure Dominic Raab has children. When he was trying to get a nanny or au pair or some kind of childcare for those children, would he employ someone who allegations had been made against, but they hadn't been they had been substantiated, but there was no case to answer because the victim didn't want to make it formal? Would he then look at all of those, consider all of those facts and think, okay, that'll be the perfect childminder for my children? No, he wouldn't. So when people come and defend the indefensible, there is always a scenario where they would tell the truth, or they know that the lies that they're telling isn't the truth. And it's not about he escalated it to the highest point to make sure that everything was okay. Despite all that escalation, he still sat back and said nothing and allowed him to take that position, which was quite...
It's a simple point, but it's a devastating one. What levels of scrutiny would you apply to somebody seeking to look after your children, or even just, mow your lawn? Well, I wouldn't be. I'd employ much lower standards for appointing a deputy chief whip than I would for somebody mowing my lawn. Jay, thank you. That's astonishing. Back to Bernard in Wandsworth. Bernard, where were we? Bernard?
Yes, good morning.
Hello,
good morning.
How are you? Nice to speak
I'm good,
to
I'm good. How are you doing?
Very good. What would you like to say?
Okay, I just wanted to say quickly that, this sort of phenomenon is happening around the world today, and it's because, in my view, we as the voters do not recognize the power that we have in holding our MPs to account. Somebody called earlier and said that we should write to them, and I don't think that we realize how effective that would be. If they get only 2,000 letters, then they feel that they can get away with it. If they get 2 million letters, then they know that they need to act.
I know that's a bit of a figure of speech, but you can't. No constituency has 2 million people in it. I think the number of letters that were sent during the partying scandal was pretty epic. It was pretty immense, and it did.
Yes.
It pushed a lot of people into the no confidence lobby during the last vote of confidence in the Prime Minister. But what can they do at the moment? Our parliamentary system being what it is, in the absence of another confidence vote, what can they do? It's going to take a cabinet-level resignation now, probably 2 or 3, in order to move the needle.
I absolutely agree because, again, the cabinet members are MPs, and they need to know that they're accountable to the people. The public servants as well need to know that the people are watching them, and need to know that they need to act in the interest of the state rather than in the interest of a political party, and it's happening all over. I mean, I grew up as the son of a minister of government for 16 years.
Gosh.
And I see the differences today from, back then. My father served under someone who was referred to as the Iron Lady of the Caribbean.
Right.
And, it's chalk and cheese, today.
Well, things in the Caribbean aren't as bad, are they, as they are here?
They are.
Absolutely
are. And I believe because we operate in politics that is isolated from that outside of our own politics, we do not realize how widespread this problem is. And the politicians tend to protect each other from being penalized in some way. And this is one of the major issues.
Self-interest. I mean, it's always been there, hasn't it? Self-interest, but it's now become the guiding light for this generation of politicians, or this this sort of new era that we find ourselves in. What would you point at as the key reason for it? I think your father served under Eugenia Charles. Am I right?
That's correct. Yeah.
What's changed then in your lifetime, or since your father's political career, to explain this decline? We'll call it.
I don't know. I think if you have leadership that is suffering with this deficiency, and you have cabinet that feels that they will lose their position in cabinet if they oppose the leadership, and that hunger for remaining in power, that hunger for ensuring that your political party remains in power, puts you in a position where you feel that you have to do whatever you have to do to ensure that they remain. I think that's what it is. No.
Prioritisation of self-interest above absolutely everything else, and longevity, which I mean, again, you're right, I'm sure, but there are other dots that need joining, because